Welcome to RotoWire Instant Reactions to Super Bowl 49. The Philadelphia Eagles top the Kansas City Chiefs 40-22. You watched the game. It wasn't that close, but it was 40-22. What a stunner in some ways. Anthony, I guess that's where we start. We'll talk about props to the Eagles, but let me say this first. This completely reminded me of the Super Bowl between the Buccaneers and the Chiefs. It was 55, Super Bowl 55, like 2020. And it was the same thing. It was Mahomes under pressure, couldn't move. That game, it was like a 21-6 at the half, 31-9 at the end. This was the same game, Anthony. That was my initial thought. It was the same game, offensive line issues. They worked to fix them after that. They're back to that place. That's their problem. What were your initial thoughts on the game?
You know, the Chiefs, we saw it early. They could not get anything going at all. And I've said it all offseason or all season that the biggest issue for Kansas City was the offensive line, Juwan Taylor, and then the Pacheco injury happened, and Hunt was a little bit of a Band-Aid, but this team could not run the football. And you can get through the regular season, and you can get through the AFC with these deficiencies. And who knows, if they would have played the Lions, we're having a different conversation here. But this Eagles defense, the Fangio defense, was so overpowering that the Chiefs couldn't dig themselves out of a hole. And that was the story of this entire game. You know, people are going to talk about Jalen Hurts and the plays he made. This was all about Philadelphia's defense and Vic Fangio.
So we are going to get to each team. Those are our initial takes. And but now let's go to the specific teams, and then we'll circle back. We're going to talk about this one in a while because there's a lot of takeaways from this game. But props to the victors. Second Super Bowl title for the Philadelphia Eagles. First one since Nick Foles. They knock off Tom Brady there. They knock off Patrick Mahomes there. That's two big victories. Anthony, we talked about this game. I told the world that if the Chiefs want to stop the run, the Chiefs can stop the run. I said they didn't need to stop Joe Mixon. Give a darn if he runs for 100 yards. Who cares? They didn't care if James Cook ran for his 85. Didn't care because ultimately that wasn't going to beat them. But they knew going into this game, they had to stop Barkley. And they were phenomenal at that. Barkley, 25 carries, 57 yards, 10 yards longest run. Everybody was betting that over 25 and a half longest run on him. Who cares? Because what ended up happening was that something had to give. And what was the give? Jalen Hurts frequently had people open. When the blitzes got dialed up in the second half, especially, Hurts just took off and ran. But early in the first half, the blitz wasn't getting home. Receivers were open. He was making throws. They were throwing the ancillary targets, which they never do. We had Jahan Dotson until late third quarter, that long catch by Devontae Smith. Jahan Dotson was the leading receiver in the game, 2 for 42. They even threw a pass to Johnny Wilson at one point. But they took what they were given. And of course, the Cooper to Gene pick 6. And we had the Zach Bond interception in the red zone. So realistically, the Eagles offense didn't drive to score a lot of points. They got the 7 and they got the 3, but the defense really put another 14 up. Initial thoughts on the Eagle side.
Yeah, you know, if you look at the box score, and, you know, Philly had, 135 rushing yards, 72 for Hurts, 57 for Barkley, 210 passing yards. And you say to yourself, well, they put 40 points on the board. Where did it come from? Yes, they had the Cooper to John, as you said, the pick 6. That was a game changer. That was a big-time momentum shift. But to me, this is Kansas City giving the Philadelphia Eagles a football on short fields and the Eagles cashing in.
Yes, and it was a perfect Philadelphia Eagles game. Go ahead.
Their longest scoring drive was 69 yards, and that was a field goal, I believe. Yeah, that was a field goal.
That was it. Look, this is a great championship effort from the Eagles. This was a team effort. This is a team that last year had a horrible defense. 2 years ago, worse than horrible. You could attack the spine of that defense. But this is a team that over the last few drafts, especially the last 2 drafts, but the last 3 drafts, they put together a collection of young talent on this defense. And then they bring in Vic Fangio. And everything was perfect. You couldn't have written it up better for this team. Defensively, this goes from, like I said a minute ago, went from a bad defense to one of the best defensive units in the NFL. And yes, in this specific game, look, we saw against the Rams, even in the snowy field, the Rams were able to move the ball. The Rams are a tough matchup for teams. But in this specific game, it was the pass rush. It was they found a liability. They knew the tackles were a liability. Joe Tooney a tackle. Mario Puig talks about this, 32-inch arms. That's a problem. The length of the arms, a lot of holding the edges, the length of arms being able to like slow down an edge rusher. Those short arms allow the better pass rushers to get around you. And then they had Caliendo on the inside. So it was just a mess. And I called before this game, Anthony. I was like, and I'm going to get back to the Eagles in a minute. I thought all along, you move Tooney inside. You put DJ Humphries in, you give him tight end help. You get one liability on the line. Look, Jawan Taylor will be your liability. You hope he holds up, but you give Humphries help. Instead, Tooney was a problem. Caliendo was a problem. And Jawan Taylor was a problem. You made 3 problems when you only needed 1. But credit to the Eagles, because the Eagles sliced and diced them and made the Chiefs pay. And Anthony, in that Super Bowl against Tampa, 55, I criticized Andy Reid in that game too, because I thought there were things he could have done in pass protection with that bad line to have mitigated some of that. And I think he messed that up. And I faultily assumed he would fix it here. But again, anything else on the Eagles defense, because they came up huge.
No, you bring up the Rams, right? And how they were able to move the football, and Stafford 324 and 2 touchdowns in the bad weather. And I'm going to keep beating this like a dead horse. The lack of a running game. That game in the playoffs, Kyron Williams went 19 for 106. Mm-hmm. You cannot be a one-dimensional football team against this Vic Fangio defense. They're hard enough to handle when you have both things going. And this was legitimately one dimension. I think through the first half, Kansas City might have had 4 or 5 running plays going into halftime.
They had 11 in the game. And of the 4, Mahomes ones probably all came in the second half. I don't think it was that many, Anthony. I think it was like, 4, maybe 4 carries. Did you say that? I think it had 4 carries. It might have been like that. It was nothing, because they came out and they tried to run a little bit in the second half, which I get it. But at that point, it was too late. But so in terms of the Eagles, back to the offense. So, and I know Scott points out that Hurts proves that he's a big-time quarterback, one of the best in the league. Look, I'm going to give him his credit. And we were filming this before they named the Super Bowl MVP. It has to be Hurts. I don't know who else to give it to. He runs for 70.
I'm looking into that now.
Yeah, so he has to be the MVP. Again, if we're wrong, we didn't see it yet because we're recording live. But all that said, we said at the beginning, Kansas City did what they were supposed to do. Stop Saquon Barkley. 100% successful on. They were beautiful. But we said at the top of the show, something's got to give. And ultimately, I thought the whole point I said into this game, you could stop Barkley, but you got to put a zone behind him. And when you rush, Spagnuolo knew this. You got to push Hurts to his left. I didn't see any attempt to do that. I thought they played a little more man than they should have, knowing that you're not beating A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith if you're playing man defense. You are not beating them, especially if the defense is committed to stop the run. So, again, in terms of how the Chiefs handle it, and I hate to throw shade on Spagnuolo, he did what he had to do with the run game, but he could have done something completely different and at least made Hurts work for a little bit. Give Hurts all the credit in the world. He did what it took to win. He did play a great game. He took what was given him. But, man, he was given favorable scenarios.
Yeah, and I'm not going to take anything away from Jalen Hurts.
No.
Do I still think when it's all said and done, if I'm a defensive coordinator, do I want the ball in Hurts' hands or Saquon's hands? Who's the bigger liability? And we saw it early. Jalen Hurts threw an early interception. That could have been a momentum shift if Kansas City's offense was performing up to a normal level. But it wasn't like Hurts wasn't spectacular tonight. And this is not discounting what he's done. Like, I was more impressed with Jalen Hurts did with his legs more than with his arm.
Yes. In 17 to 22 to 21, long touchdown to Devontae Smith. But you're right. And think about this. In terms of pressure, there was no second half pressure on Jalen Hurts. And Hurts did a lot of his damage after halftime. A lot of his damage. touchdown to Devontae Smith came there. Like I said, a lot of that, because what pressure was there? You're going into the half 24-0. You know you won the game. Your coaches aren't telling you that, but you don't have to worry. What are the Chiefs going to do? They're not getting past that offensive line. And then the touchdown to Smith was perfect because the Chiefs assumed Barkley was going to run to drain the clock, and Hurts was named the Super Bowl MVP. So we knew that, but that's confirmed by Ian Rappaport, FYI. And so, but yes, that was it. So Hurts had no pressure. And then we saw it when they brought the blitz in the second half. Hurts took off up the middle twice for huge chunks of yardage. Beautiful. Again, he did his job, but don't misplace this. Second half, he had no pressure on him. He was on house money. And again, Anthony and I are not throwing any shade on Jalen Hurts. He did exactly what he should have done. Anthony?
Yeah, and this is Jalen Hurts. That the defense, I'm going to give the credit to Fangio, his defense. They game plan to take out Saquon Barkley. It's not like this was a defense game plan to shut down Jalen Hurts.
Yes. And that means everything. When you go so far to sell out in the NFL, you are giving the other team. You're basically giving. It's like a team that, loads up in basketball. You load up guys to stop the three. Well, you're going to give up a ton underneath. Something's got to give. And like I said, I did fault Spags for not doing enough zone behind him. But again, it was all there. Anything else on the Eagles? One thing before we transition. If you bet this game and you bet props and you bet this and that, it was 40-22. Obviously, it was not 40-22. It was literally 40-0 almost for the most part. And if you didn't call that outcome, your props didn't hit. If you didn't call Eagles blowout, your props weren't going to come in. And it's just that simple, because that's what happened. But even in a blowout, you would think the Chiefs would pile up the garbage numbers. And Mahomes threw for 257 and 3 touchdowns, a couple of picks. But it was Xavier Worthy, that long 50-yard touchdown at the end. That got him to 8, 157 and 2. So in terms of props, I didn't get hardly anything right because I did not call Eagles blowout. Before we get to the Chiefs side, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, when we bet this, if you miss the game script, your props are burned.
Yeah, I'm fortunate enough because my biggest wagers, because sometimes I normally stick to a unit size, but I hammered the Jalen Hurts touchdown. I think that was mispriced at -120, and I think it was mispriced because all the opportunities that he gets maybe a couple tush pushes a game opportunity. So that price, I think at -120 in this big spot, that was one of my bigger bets of the night. So yes, I lost a lot of my player props, whether it was rushing props, receiving props. I don't even know if I hit one. But my two biggest plays was a Jalen Hurts anytime touchdown, and I also had Xavier Worthy, and that really bailed me out tonight. But you're right. When you're scripting this out in your head, because if you're betting player props correctly, you also have to try to script these games out. And yes, I'm sorry, if you say you had an Eagles blowout, I don't know if I'm going to believe you.
I know, because when did the Chiefs get blown out? Oh, Tampa Bay, Super Bowl 55. But I didn't see that as a repeat. Maybe I should have. Maybe that was what I missed. So props, yes. So I got the Dallas Goedert run wrong. I loved them over 3.5 receptions or over 4.5 receptions. Obviously, they didn't have to throw. They threw 22 passes, and they didn't need him. And that was part of the game script thing. They ran 45 times. And I didn't see a 45 rushing attempt game to 22 Jalen Hurts passing attempts. So I got that one wrong. Like you, I love the Jalen Hurts, and I got it at -110 on the touchdown. So I love that one. On the Kansas City side, yes, I got fortunate with the Xavier Worthy one over 5.5 catches. That was one I posted on the Bookies live show. I posted that. I had Kelsey doing everything, and 4 for 39. So he did nothing. Got that one wrong. I also I put it as a low confidence bet. I had Hollywood Brown over 3.5 catches. He only had 2. But of the main ones, it was pretty much Kelsey. I lost 3 props on him. I had touchdown, yardage, and receptions. So I sunk the ship with him. So it was really 2 and 4 on props. So it was not a good game. But again, it was all because of game script. We actually kind of talked about the Chiefs already, and I don't even know how much there is to say. But the one thing I'll say is this. If people were Eagles fans, you loved this. You didn't sweat it. You enjoyed it. Front to end, you celebrated the entire second half. It was a very wonderful experience. If you were a neutral NFL fan, or well, especially if you're a neutral fan, this was the 8th blowout in 13 playoff games this season. This was the worst postseason I've ever seen, because blowouts are terrible in the playoffs. When you have these single slate games and you have these double-digit outcomes, those aren't fun to watch. This was, again, if you were an Eagles fan, this was fun. If you were anybody else, this was not a fun game to watch, because it was never competitive.
I will interject here, because you're right, but it's not only Eagles fans. There are a lot of people who they hate the Chiefs. They wanted to see the Chiefs lose.
Yes.
So like those people also enjoyed tonight. But for the most part, people like you and me, who we gear up for this game all year, it was bad. 24-0 at halftime. It's not like, even if it was 14 or 17, you could put that in your mind. All right, Mahomes, they can climb out of this. They're getting the ball back. When it hit 24, I'm like, yeah, they're getting the ball back, but I don't see it happening.
Jamie says that Vegas won big on all the bets. When I was checking on DraftKings today, it posted that the Eagles were getting the most. It was like a good percentage of the bets were tilted to the Eagles. So maybe you're right, but I don't know. I look, I had the Chiefs, but I was in the minority. When I had the 50 people on the marathon, 65% were going Eagles on this one. And the consistent line was the Eagles had the better team. And I thought that the Chiefs had the better quarterback and the better coaching. And I thought that would come through. Clearly didn't. Yes. But I don't think Vegas took a bath. And I can't check on DraftKings now, because I think that ship has sailed. But I know it was a good percentage. And it might have been like 55 to 45% of the bets. I don't know how much money. I don't know what the take was on it. What are your thoughts on that, Anthony?
I mean, I said this last week when I said I feel like at the end, when we have a lot of the new bettors come in who bet the right going into the game, all the new sportsbook signups, we probably got a lot of people who are betting again against Kansas City just because they wanted to see them lose.
I wonder how many
I really think that's a real thing, that people just hate the Chiefs that much, because we went through it with Brady already.
You know what I'd like to find out after the game? I'd like to find out, because this is the second year of Swifties. So the Swifties kind of came in mid-season last year, but with betting legal, how many states, Anthony, is betting legalized in?
You would think I know that. I would say
that's why I asked
35?
you. That sounds right. 35 sounds right. Yeah, I think that's right. We're wrong. We're a little off, right? But if gambling's legalized in 35 states, and a lot of the Swifties now are a year immersed into this, you would think there'd be gambling on this. And
38.
38. And so I'd like, we'll find this out later. Of course, the season's over. You guys won't be paying too much attention to us, but I want to find out there was like a surge of money, because there are so many people that love Taylor Swift, and those bets are probably going to the Chiefs. Anthony?
Yeah. And every sports book, at least the main ones, whether DraftKings had them, FanDuel had a Bet365, they actually had Taylor Swift or Swiftie props. And if you're not familiar with them, they're usually affiliated with Travis Kelce. And they were props named after like a Taylor Swift song, and there was a prop attached to it. So these were targeting the Swifties.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm sure, because, if you're not into football, like the Super Bowl is the game where you want to have some action on it, right? Somebody's wife might want to sign up to a sports book and, okay, I'm watching a game anyway. Let me get some action. Let me bet the length of the halftime or length of that. So yeah, this would be the game where Swifties are going to come in, sign up for new accounts and bet on the Chiefs, on Travis Kelce props and the Swiftie plays.
Man, and Jamie points out, and I made this mistake to a degree. Eagles were up 17-0. A bunch of people look at Chiefs at plus 550. There was a point, and I think it was 10-0, and the Eagles are plus 3.5. I go, are the Eagles going to lose a game by more than the field goal? And I didn't make a big bet on it, but I put a bet on it because it was like, it's like I've seen the Chiefs before. I didn't think back to that Tampa Bay Super. I thought about that one a little too late. So yeah, a little bit of a mistake. Jamie mentioned that Taylor Swift, I saw her once, and I saw Trump once. I saw them both showed once. Now, if the Chiefs were scoring and if Travis Kelce was in the end zone, we would have seen Swift more. Anthony, anything on that?
Absolutely agree on that.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Corian mentions Chiefs had an opportunity to make history tonight. They looked inept. They looked, yeah, you're right. You're right. They did not look like a great team all season. We talked about how they do save a lot for the right moments. Ultimately, it was pass protection. And we talked about this earlier in the show. That Super Bowl 55, they didn't protect Mahomes. And after that, remember, they brought in that big infusion of talent. They brought Tooney in. They drafted Humphrey. They drafted Trey Smith. And they brought in free agents. They brought in some other people for the tackle spots, too. And so they really shored up that line. And then over the each years, remember, they've got, like, Mahomes' contract is massive. And it's hard to keep when these guys are up for more money. Trey Smith's contract's up. Yes. And odds are he's probably not going back to Kansas City. I don't know if they can make that happen. But, but the offensive line need, we've seen it twice now. If Mahomes doesn't have a line, teams will just blitz incessantly. If you get the right matchup of a team that can send that pressure, that's a problem. So the ultimate thing is, it wasn't keeping Tyreek Hill a few years ago. It was bolstering the line. And we got to go back. And now they're not really paying up at receiver. Rashee Rice will be cheap for another couple of years, probably, especially losing year to injury. I don't know how quickly he's going to get paid. Maybe year 4. Worthy was just a rookie this year. I think they can get Hollywood Brown back cheap. I imagine, he didn't play hardly any games. My guess is they could bring him in on a maybe close to minimum deal. Mm-hmm. And I imagine he'd want to play there. So there is some salary cap relief, but they're paying Chris Jones a ton. Anything on the Chiefs going forward like that?
Yeah, the Chiefs need help. Now, it's crazy to say because who the Chiefs are and what they've been able to accomplish through the years. And you bring up the good point. After that Tampa Bay debacle in the Super Bowl, the Chiefs, they didn't want to go through the short-term rebuild. They said, okay, we want to go back there right away. We want to get back on top. And I see the same thing here. I can see the Chiefs, right, because their defense with Spags is good. I'm not worried about the defense. I'm worried about the offense. And I think this was a big wake-up call tonight against Philly to where, hey, 4 years ago, when they still had Tyreek Hill and that offense was explosive, being down 24-0, I think they would go at a halftime, hey, we're confident that we can climb out of this hole. They can't do that anymore, and they know that. You got Rice coming back, and it was an early season injury, so he'll probably be back good enough week 1. You brought up Worthy. Do they, they need a running back. Pacheco's nice. He was a late round pick coming off of a lower body injury. Hunt, what are you doing with him? What are you doing with P. Ryan? I would go, right? They have the 31st pick in the NFL draft. This is extremely deep running back class. You're not going to get Genty, but you might be able to get the second best running back off the board. And I think you need to go get your offensive line help, whether that is signing veteran free agents or drafting somebody. Those are your two biggest needs, because I think if you can reinvent those two positions, this offense is going to be a lot more dynamic with a young, explosive, dual threat running back, and just put the Band-Aid on the offensive line. This is not like this is the Chiefs. They're not far away. They just lost the Super Bowl after winning 2 in a row and after being in 5 out of the past 6 or 7. This is Kansas City. There's a really good chance, if they don't change a thing, that they're back here with Philly next year. So I think they go and try to reinvent themselves offensively.
I get what you're saying. I would spend a 3rd round pick on a running back. I wouldn't spend a 1st. I would do one of two things. I would draft an offensive lineman, certainly. That's where I would start, offensive line. I would try to trade up. I would try to trade up to pick 15 and maybe get it. And we haven't looked at I haven't looked at the tackle class yet. All right. So full disclosure, I've looked at skill position players. I'm a good few weeks away from getting the offensive line players. So understand that. But if I don't know what kind of talent is coming out in the draft at offensive line. But if there's an offensive tackle they could get under cost control for 5 years, that's, to me, Anthony. So I get what you're saying about running back, but I still feel like running back's replaceable. I think you could piece together a running back room. Go ahead.
Yeah, but then my but is looking at, Derek. Look what Derek Henry did. Look what Josh Jacobs did. Look what Saquon did. And you see, they
didn't get to the Super Bowl,
right? But this is Kansas City. Kansas City did it with Kareem Hunt. Right. So just imagine putting a dynamic player. I don't know. Maybe it's just the season. I'm drinking the running back Kool-Aid because of the season we just saw.
You're right. And there's that recency bias always. And look, everybody out there this is what's happened in the NFL. The NFL is a reactionary league, right? And so the passing era, as that got established over time, what happened defensively is players they wanted smaller and smaller players in the secondary. You want linebackers, corners, and safeties that can run. You need these. So the linebackers, this is where the big changes is linebacker. You said those big hulking linebackers. You don't have those much anymore. You have these guys that are more hybrids. Their coverage is often way more important than their run defense. And yeah, some of them need to stop the run, but you think about how they're deployed. They're used as edge rushers or they're used as coverage players often, not always, but often. And so the league, once the defenses went that way, what's the antidote? Oh, if you're going to have small linebackers and you're going to play two high shells, we're going to run the ball. So you bring in a Derrick Henry, a Josh Jacobs, a Saquon Barkley. You're right. And that works. The Chiefs' antidote was that Mahomes was similar to Brady in that, we'll just pick you apart all day. But both of them needed protection. You remember the Brady days. Yep. If you got pocket pressure on Brady, he didn't have an interior that could protect him. It fell apart.
Yeah.
And it's the same for Mahomes. So it's just the same. And we go back to that Super Bowl where the Giants beat them. You get pressure with 4. And all of a sudden, it all falls apart. So you're right. You either can go running game or you need that quarterback that's just going to go snap, 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 and just enough protection. Just pick the little, 14-play drives. We're good with that. Thoughts there?
Yeah, you bring up the protection for Mahomes, protection for Brady, and yes, in their Super Bowl losses, they were both because of the pass rush. Both of those Giants teams, and I think Spags might have been the defensive coordinator for both. So I think you're right about maybe prioritizing offensive line, but I also would think go get an explosive running back, because I think back to those Chiefs teams, those early Chiefs teams with Tyreek and Kelsey. They won with Damian Williams. I think that was their running back, one of their Super Bowls. You can get away with that when you have prime Travis Kelsey and Tyreek Hill. You don't really have that right now, or maybe you do with Rice and Worthy, where you can afford to kind of have a little bit of a downgrade at running back.
You're right. And the thing is, and the reason they got rid of Hill, like I said, it was money so you could spend on the line. But the other thing was the two high safeties. Notice teams were taking away the over-the-top ball. And that was what they loved. Now, Tyreek could do a lot more than that. But that was, you remember those early days with Mahomes and Tyreek. It was just going nuts over the top. Yeah. One high safeties, we were burning you right, left. And we saw Worthy get over the top when the game was out of hand today. But certainly when they were playing the regular too high early, it wasn't happening. And so there wasn't that at all. So it's a matter like Worthy, it's great because he's fast, but they learned to use him on a lot of different concepts, short and intermediate. So again, the Chiefs, whether it's your way, go with the running back. But my thought is you've invested your franchise as Mahomes. Mm-hmm. But you might be right. One of the two ways they're going to have to address this. I think we said all we needed to about the Eagles. We gave them all their praise and credit that they deserved. But I do want to say, where do we view the Eagles next year?
I think there's a realistic conversation to be had that as long as Saquon Barkley is on this team, because, we've seen Hurts and A.J. Brown, a lot of these guys without Saquon. And last year, they were getting blown out of the playoffs by Baker Mayfield. And this year, you bring in Saquon Barkley, and they look like the best team in the NFL. There's a conversation to be had that there could be a mini dynasty here where Philly is just so far and ahead of the NFC teams. Now, granted, a team like the Lions, before the injuries, they looked like they took a step forward with defense. Well, they lost a lot of their coordinators. What are the 49ers going to be? Yes, they're going to be healthy. It's going to be a controversial offseason with Deebo Samuel. We already heard that news. What is CMC going to be? What is this team and offense going to look like next year? And when I look at this NFC overall, there's a case to be made that Philly's the best team there. Howie Roseman, what he's been able to do as general manager year in, year out, Nick Sirianni's always seemingly on the hot seat by national media.
Not for a while now.
Jalen Hurts can't get it done. There's always reasons why Philly can't. but all they do is win football games. Now, yes, they have flaws and they can be exposed here and there. But with Saquon, it seems like those flaws are really covered up. So going into this offseason, I would try to keep as many guys as you can, because we know if you're a free agent, you're coming off the Super Bowl, you want to get paid.
Think about the defense in Philly. They are super young. There's a great chance this defense is not just better, but significantly better next year. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean in their second season. And I know cornerback play isn't sticky season to season, but these guys really, really showed it as rookies. And Zach Bond, they got him in a cheap contract. He was mostly a special teams guy in New Orleans. And he comes over and he has a massive season. I don't know what his contract is. And I don't know if hopefully it wasn't just 1 year.
He's a free agent.
So, all right, that's good. Yeah, so it would stink to lose him. Nakobe Dean hopefully recovered. I don't know how long his timetable is. So there's little questions there. But realistically, you've got that front three. Milton Williams is a free agent. Milton Williams made himself a lot. So now that I think about it, the corners could get better, definitely with age, another year. And you got the game wrecker, Jalen Carter. That's losing Milton Williams isn't going to help. If Zach Bond, if they can't retain him, that would be a problem, because he really was, the straw that stirred the drink for him. If Dean doesn't come back, so I guess there could be some questions. But again, this is a young nucleus, Anthony.
Yeah, and outside of Bond and Milton Williams, Josh Sweat's also a free agent. But Avonte Maddox, a lot of role players.
Yes.
These are, and outside of Bond, and I think they'll retain somebody like Bond, but with their young nucleus, right? Because you got the corners and Jalen Carter. I think Carter's that guy. He next to Chris Jones, I think Carter might be the best defensive lineman in football.
Game record.
And another guy on a rookie deal,
right? Oh my goodness. Offensively, look, I'm kind of glad Kellen Moore. It sounds like he's going to take the Saints job tomorrow. We're recording this Sunday night. Obviously, if you're live with us, you know that. If you're watching on a replay, you don't know when you'll see it. But we expect Kellen Moore to take the Saints job. I think that's good. I've been an apologist for Kellen Moore for a lot of years. I don't think he optimized his offense. And look, they did great. But I think there could have been so much more done with the passing game. I think they could have integrated Barkley and the passing game. This should have been an unstoppable offense. Saquon Barkley, force of nature. A.J. Brown, again, you'll hear me say this all the time. You've got Brown, you've got Tyreek Hill last year, like 2 years ago. I don't know if he's going to get back to form, but he was there. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. I said they were all tied for the numbers here. Tyreek Hill might not be anymore. I think he started aging. But right there, A.J. Brown is tied with the best receiver in the game. They just do it differently. If A.J. Brown got the targets and the usage that Jefferson or Chase got, they're all dominant in their own way. So you've got this force of nature in A.J. Brown. Devontae Smith, are there 5 number 2s that are better in the league? Probably not. Dallas Goedert misses time, but again, when he's on the field, excellent option. And then the offensive line and Hurts, it's still the dual threat quarterback. I just think that I don't know who they're going to bring in to run the offense, but they got to be careful who they hire. But if they bring somebody in that could really rethink this thing, I think it could be even better. Am I crazy?
No, and you're right about Kellen Moore. And that was the thing about Kellen Moore in Dallas. They didn't use the passing game a lot with their running backs. And they had Pollard, and some of the numbers were good, but they didn't really throw their backs a ton in Dallas. And I'm a Cowboys fan. I know this pretty intimately. And we didn't really see a ton of that in San Diego or Los Angeles. And I think we saw this in Philly because Saquon's a very capable receiver out of the backfield. So, yes, I like Kellen Moore too. But I think there are some holes. I don't know who the Eagles are going to bring in. I don't know if there's anybody in-house. But can they optimize this offense? Well, Saquon has a few good years left. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's no doubt. So right now, handicapping the NFC, the Lions still because they lost 18 defensive players to injured reserve. They were a top 10 defense, but ultimately, and it depends who Philly loses. So this could be, we don't know how the injured players will come back for the Lions. We don't know who the Eagles will lose. That's going to be a big point of who's the number 1 team in the NFC next year, because whichever team has the better defense gets a leg up. Now, I know the Lions lose Ben Johnson. On defense, they lose Aaron Glenn, their 2 coaches. That's a brain drain. That's potentially a big deal. But now who Philly has at offensive coordinator, these coaches coaching moves are going to be very paramount to what we're going to see in the NFC. The Lions' offensive line slid a little bit this year. They weren't the dominant unit they were. The Eagles, I thought, were a better line this year. Now, 2 years ago, that wasn't close to the case, but I think that's leveled off. So I think there's a lot to go on here. You mentioned the 49ers. I think they're going to be in transition for a bit. As some players are aging, Kittle's going to be over 30. Like you said, Debo's going to be gone. It's just a weird situation there. Do you think it's right now today? Is it mostly the Eagles and Lions?
Absolutely. I don't know. I can't think of another team. Maybe Washington. Like Washington's that underdog to where if they make the right moves, because Jaden Daniels can play. Like if they go and bring in a wide receiver, and I think that's the biggest missing piece is the wide receiver position, because like they got very far with Zacchaeus and Jamison Crowder, who I forgot was still in the league. Sometimes, you can bring in another playmaker there and a couple of defensive guys because Dan Quinn is a defensive genius. I think Washington can make some noise, but right now, as it is, it's Washington, or it's Detroit and Philly.
Anthony, I get the talk about Washington, and I get it that Jaden Daniels had a great season. And yeah, way better than Jared Goff and probably better than Jalen Hurts. But that offensive line is a problem, and Cosme had a serious injury. And that defense, Quinn did a great job, but it's very lacking in talent. I just think the Lions and the Eagles potentially have a much, much more safe infrastructure. And like you said, the Commanders can't compete. I would be surprised if this wasn't a team that regressed by a couple games next year. You know how we see those teams make the playoffs with a magical run, and then all of a sudden they kind of come back to earth the next year. I wonder, and like I said, you might be right. So you're leaning more on the probable side that they continue to make a step forward, and I'm a little more apprehensive. Any other thoughts there?
No, I'm going to be a little bit more optimistic with Washington, because I do feel that the NFC is is still inferior. And they had a lot, right? They had a lot of double-digit team wins, but we saw those. Green Bay got smoked. Minnesota got smoked, right? Like the AFC is still dominant at the quarterback position. The NFC, there's a handful of good quarterbacks, and Jaden Daniels is one of them, which is why I will not discount the run that they can make, because let's face it, he's already a top 3 quarterback in the NFC. I don't think that's being crazy.
It's not quarterback play in the NFC. There's no question. Yeah. And I mean, you want to get crazy, you can make a case in the NFC who's better, Stafford, and maybe not. I don't know if Stafford is another year aging on Stafford. You throw another year on him. He's not getting better each year. You could make a case after 1 year. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. AFC. Let's put a bow on this. So we kind of tied up the Chiefs, but we'll time up in the concept of next year. 7 straight AFC championship games. 4 Super Bowls in those 7 years. They appeared at 4 Super Bowls. Sort of 2 and 2 in that range. It sounds like, I think that's about right. That sounds right. If I'm off one, maybe I missed one here. But I think the Bills are still in the equation, I think. And the Ravens are still in the equation. And I know we had nice seasons from the Chargers, but I just think those 3 quarterbacks are so far above everybody else. And each of those teams have good defenses. Is it going to be hard to factor in somebody today? And we're talking today, other than those 3 teams?
It's those 3. And again, I'll give a little bit of a not a dark horse, but a team that I think has the quarterback, and that's Cincinnati.
Yeah. And the Higgins thing will be important.
Did you hear reports that there's a chance that Higgins resigns, which I don't. I saw something during Super Bowl week. I think James Palmer might have reported it. But they're saying there's a good chance he resigns. I didn't think, because he's the marquee free agent receiver, he can break the bank, but
we'll see.
I mean, that would be outstanding.
Yeah, it's still the Bengals. And the Bengals have a long history of not spending that money. Burrow's pushing hard. He's pushing hard for Hendrickson to come back. So we'll see on that. So go ahead.
We saw Carson Palmer what he did to get out of there. Do you think maybe the Brown family, hey, we don't want to lose Joe Burrow?
That would not be a good business move. It would not be a good business move. So today, handicapping it now, next year, do the Chiefs, the Ravens, or the Bills, if no other team makes it, which one of those makes it to Super Bowl next year?
I would put in when the market opens, not a lot. I would sprinkle because you can do a Super Bowl matchup, their markets. I would go for a Chiefs Eagles rematch if that market came out right now.
Yeah. The Ravens, it's so hard because that Myles Garrett line now is stuck in my head. The only team that could beat the Ravens is the Ravens. And man, he said it and it came out. He said it earlier, but I reheard it after they lost in the playoffs. I'm thinking, man, he's right. They're the only team that could beat the Ravens. And it's like, seriously? And how horrible. I mean, because realistically, that offense should be unstoppable. Even if they don't have great receivers, doesn't matter. So
Mark Andrews stopped it.
Right. But that's it. The Ravens beat the Ravens. Ultimately, it was a component of their team that beat their team. The Bills, the history has said they're not really getting there. Can they break through? Defensively, they were better than I thought they'd be this year. You're probably right. People hate the Chiefs. So right now, if they get any offensive line help, they're probably going back.
And you got to think they're going to be better at what, because like outside of name, DeAndre Hopkins is just a name. They're getting back Rashee Rice, who was emerging as a top receiver before the injury. So right now, just getting him back is an offensive upgrade.
100%. 100%. Any final thoughts?
Great season. The outcome, the Super Bowl, I'm still shocked by it. Even though I probably shouldn't be, but I was with you. I was one of those. Philly has the better team, the better offense, but we've seen this. I mean, so did the 49ers. And maybe the Philly did 2 years ago too, but I will always back Mahomes and the experience and Andy Reid. Maybe not moving forward because they got knocked off. Let's see what the Chiefs do. Because if we're having the same conversation again next year and they didn't make any improvements, then I might be picking against them. Look,
I got nothing right in the Super Bowl, and I'm saying this with a joke and a smile on my face. I got the over right. I called the over. Not by any reason on my own. That's a joke because I did get it right, but so what? Everything else wrong. Nothing else mattered. Didn't see the blowout coming. But again, great season. Every one of you, whether you spent tonight with us, weeks throughout the season, we appreciate you. You mean everything to us. We don't have a show if it's not for you. If you come in and you contribute or you listen or you just put a smile on your face when you're listening, that's all we care about. We hope that you enjoy our product in the off season. If you want to keep up with our work, RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube now, that's where this show is at. We will have content on there throughout the offseason. We'll be here for you. Social media across all platforms at RotoWire. Anthony does videos. I do video. I'm not sure what the RotoWire Fantasy Football podcast rotation is. Anthony and I did have one show a week last year. My guess is we'll find that out within the next week or two. Make sure you follow Anthony on the X at The Real NFL Guru. You could catch me over at Jim Coventry NFL. And again, if you want a free look at RotoWire with no credit card, especially if you're like a baseball, we have the best baseball coverage on the planet. You go to rotowire.com/pod, no credit card. Again, 2 days free. Check it out. If you like it, join the team. If not, we're just glad you took a look. Anything else closing out about the work we're doing?
No, come and follow or subscribe to this YouTube channel. We need a few more to get to 3,000, which was our goal. So if you're listening right now, RotoWire, Fantasy Football, search that on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, and help us out. We'll appreciate it.
All right, everybody. Thanks for hanging with us. Almost 800 of you in the house. We appreciate you. Have a wonderful night. If you had a little bit to drink today and you got to drive, please, please, please don't drive. Get a ride. Be careful. If you're watching during daytime tomorrow, you're thinking, what are we, nuts? Yes, we are nuts, but that's another story for another day. For Anthony Cervino, I'm Jim Coventry. Everybody, take care. Jamie, thanks for the great comments as well. Bye, all.